It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
Hello and welcome to this Tuesday, August 29th edition of RealAg Radio. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith. Yes, it is time for Tuesdays with Lyndsey, and we've got a great show lined up for you today. So I feel like I'm on a theme lately with talking about weed control, but frankly, it's just kind of that time of year, right? As harvest gets rolling, you start to see those green spots, green patches, things above the canopy. But of course, also in our pastures, we start to see some of what got away on us, what's going to seed. And one of those awful, terrible, horrible weeds are thistles. Specifically today, we're going to talk about Canada thistle and management within our pastures. So stick around for that one. We do have some rather troubling news out of Ontario. Of course, not entirely surprising, but disappointing nonetheless. We have got confirmation of the first Palmer amaranth plants identified positively in the province. So Ontario, of course, no stranger to some of these very tough to kill weeds and strange pigweeds moving up from other areas. We certainly have water hemp here and now Palmer amaranth. Now, this is a weed, and especially if you've listened to this show or if you've taken any of our schools, this is a very tough to kill weed. It's a very large plant. It's very prolific, and it can be very expensive to try and get a handle on this weed once it establishes. So Mike Cobra, who is the Ontario weed specialist, he's going to be here in the first segment to talk about the issue, where the plant has been found, how to identify it definitively, because of course it can look like some of its pigweed friends. Let's put it that way. Also on today's show, in sticking with the weed control / pesticide train, we're going to hear from Greg Bartley. He's with Pulse Canada, and we're going to talk about the Keep It Clean campaign. So if you've not heard of the Keep It Clean campaign, you'll learn all about what that is, but more importantly, why it's so important. So Greg's going to join the show. He's with Pulse Canada. He's going to talk about why it's so important to know what some of the restrictions may be, or what to do if you've used a certain product and you're not entirely sure where you may be able to market that crop. So stick around. That's at the end of the show. We'll have that conversation. And then I've got Tara Mulhern Davidson. So she is a rancher out of southwest Saskatchewan. She has, in the past 5 years, they've had 3 rather severe droughts. They are yet again in a drought situation this year. And I wanted to ask her what it takes to endure some of these droughts, especially so many years back to back, and how she's managing on the business side to get through these, what programs are working, not working, and perhaps maybe what needs to change to help support our ranchers who are, of course, trying very hard to not just make a living, but also continue to support our grasslands, which are a ecological system that we really, really need in Canada and should value. They do wonderful things for us, these grasslands. And one of them is support our ranchers, of course. So, and our ranchers support them. That's how that works. So Tara will be on later in the show as well. Really looking forward to that conversation. And that does bring up, there's a few things on today's show that I would love to get your feedback on. So Tara's discussion on drought and perhaps what programs might be in place that are useful or not useful. I think that one is likely a conversation many of you would love to weigh in on. So if you would like to, 1-855-776-6147 is our feedback line. You can, of course, zip me an email, lsmith@realagriculture.com, and you can find us across social media at RealAgriculture. And of course, if you've got questions or anything you want to know about Palmer amaranth, thistle control, or if you're looking for more information on Keep It Clean, or anything we talk about on the show, and you maybe missed the email that we said, or you missed where to go for more info, or you missed the title of something, we are here to help. So by all means, please reach out. I can find you that extra info. I know when you're driving sometimes it can be hard to scribble something down or remember you want to look something up. So highly recommend just zip me a note and I'll find everything for you. We'll get it to you, of course. That's what we're here for, guys. That's what we're here for. And gals. Equal opportunity. Alrighty, let's take a quick break, and I will be back just after this, and we'll have Bern Tobin's interview with Mr. Mike Cowbrough about the Palmer Amaranth finding here in Ontario right after this.
This is the sound of a farmer with a clear view of their fields and finances.
As is this.
And this.
Crop planning, profit reports, budget, cash flow statements, all laid out clearly with Ag Expert.
To view from inside the combine or in the field, projecting what's next.
Get valuable perspective anywhere you are. Ag Expert, farm management software built for Canadian farms. Visit agexpert.ca to get started today.
What were the issues in your fields this year? Did you do a soil sample? What is your soil sample telling you about some of the nutrient issues that you might be having going into next year? What herbicides did you use? What residues you might be concerned about? What weed issues did you have? What crop residues did you have? How well do you know your fields?
Get the answers to all the questions you have about your pulse crop at the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com.
Introducing the all-new Xerion 12 Series tractor by Kloss. Redesigned from the ground up to redefine the high-capacity four-wheel drive market. With 653 max horsepower, industry-leading hydraulic flow, a silky smooth CVT, a powerful TerraTrack undercarriage, and a quiet, comfortable cab with 20% more legroom. More than just power. The all-new Xerion by Kloss.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Tuesday. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and calling all Ontario soybean growers, Savita International invites you to join their Titans of Agronomy events featuring an array of industry experts, including Mr. Peter Johnson, Albert Tenuta, Horst Bonner, Greg Stewart, and commodity expert Bailey Eichinger. Join them in Woodstock on August 31st. Yes, that's this week, or at the newly renovated site at Inkerman on September 7th. That's where I'll be as well. You can pre-register at savita.com/events for the Titans of Agronomy. Okay, and speaking of, we've got Mr. Mike Cowbrough joins us now to talk about a rather unsettling, but perhaps not quite surprising, finding in Ontario where they have in fact confirmed Palmer Amaranth in the province.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin. Welcome to Real Agriculture. Today, I'm at the University of Guelph, catching up with Ontario weed specialist Mike Cowbrough. Mike's got some news for us today. Not the best of news, but I'll let him share it. Mike, we've got a new weed in Ontario.
Yeah, I think we thought this day was going to come for a while now, but it is here. We found for the first time in a field in Ontario, Wellington County, the presence of Palmer Amaranth, a member of the pigweed family, a weed that's been a problem in the U.S. for quite some time now.
So, Mike, you mentioned U.S. farmers been wrestling with this weed for about 30 years. It's now, crossed the border. How did it get here?
Yeah, I think the truth of the matter is, Bern, we have no definitive way of knowing, but I think we can point to a couple of possibilities or likelihoods of entry into this particular field. So I think, farm machinery always plays a significant role, especially harvesting equipment. So if you've brought in a combine from the U.S. areas that have Palmer Amaranth, or any machinery, quite frankly, that can hold some soil to it, that might have seed on it, that is a point of entry. So sanitation and cleaning of that machinery is critical. I think in this case, because it was a mixed operation, livestock operation, that brought in feed from other jurisdictions, that any feed may be originating from areas that have Palmer Amaranth, or even elevator screenings that people bring in either for bedding or for as a feed byproduct, like that's probably a higher probability of bringing in seed of Palmer Amaranth. Those would be the two most likely scenarios. Yeah, birds could fly over and crap it out, but probably more machinery or feed.
So I want to talk about how we can control and ID this in a second. But hey, what does this look like in the field? I mean, this is a growing plant. That's going to be 6 to 8 feet tall, right?
Yeah. So I think early on, and why you tend to identify it this time of year is early on, it's probably fairly hard to distinguish it from other common pigweeds. I think this is probably the most important point for your viewers, in that both the landowner and the agronomist at this location, when they saw this plant, they're like, wow, this is a weird looking pigweed. This is unlike any other pigweed I've seen on this farm before. And that's usually a pretty good gut check to pursue either water hemp or Palmer amaranth. And so, there's about 5 things that I look at if I'm trying to identify Palmer amaranth. And so the first is, this is a weird looking pigweed. Then there's these kind of 5 things I want to knock off, because the reality, Bern, with water hemp and Palmer amaranth is they're both very diverse in terms of their appearance in the field. Even within a field, they can look dramatically different. So there's not one feature that tells you automatically it's Palmer amaranth. There's probably 4 to 5 that if you check off, there's a high probability it's Palmer amaranth, and you can go to someone else to get confirmation.
Awesome. So what are we looking for?
Okay, so first and foremost, it's the length of the petiole. So the petiole is just what attaches the leaf blade to the stem of pigweed. And on Palmer amaranth, it's pretty easy to find a petiole that is longer than the leaf blade. So if you fold over that petiole, it should peek over the top of the leaf blade. And so that is pretty easy to find on Palmer amaranth. I mean, you can find that trait on water hemp, but it's pretty rare. And so that's why you look at some other features. The next feature I look to is the stem. Then there's 2 things on the stem, Bern. It's one, any lack of fuzz or hair. There might be some texture, some coarseness, but it's hairless. And then also the stem itself is quite a bit larger than other pigweeds. Like this stem here is around 2 inches in diameter. Now other pigweeds on their own will get bigger stems, but comparatively Palmer amaranth's size will be quite a bit bigger. And then when we look at leaf, there's 2 things to look at leaf. One is they have kind of a diamond shape appearance, whereas water hemp is more like long and narrow. And then lastly, some people refer to it as like a poinsettia type appearance. So if you kind of look down at the cluster of leaves, it kind of looks a little bit like a poinsettia. So those are kind of 5 things that if you check all those boxes, then I'd be taking it to someone like Francois Tardif. And then also there's a DNA test that can confirm, or at least give a high probability that, what you're IDing, what you're seeing is in fact Palmer amaranth. So we did that process with this plant. Right. Those boxes got checked. We had other people look at it and say, this looks like Palmer. And then the DNA test said, high probability that this is Palmer. Yeah.
Hey, let's talk about how to control this.
Yeah.
U.S. farmers have had to go to every tool in the box to pull this off. Talk about how they all come together to hopefully control a weed like this.
Yeah, so I think we're fortunate in Ontario that a lot of good work in water hemp's already been done by Peter Sikkema and his group at the Ridgetown campus, University of Guelph. So practically speaking, your approach or your best practices to manage water hemp are transferable to Palmer amaranth. And so on the herbicide end, it's using that really effective soil-applied herbicide. That is your first line of defense, and then going through with effective post-emergent products. Now that might be switching, means that you might in soybeans have to switch to a herbicide-tolerant technology to deal with that. Luckily in corn there are lots of options, but the key thing is this germinates and emerges over a fairly lengthy period of time, so you need both pre- and post-emergent herbicides to mitigate any additional recruitment. But I think the most important thing is, like, long term, we're not going to solve this out of the jug, so we need to be relying on other modes of action, and so things like cover crops, right? So cover crops after wheat harvest, cover crops after soybeans, if you're not going to winter wheat, those are important to kind of suppress recruitment and prevent more seed production. Tillage becomes a valuable tool in some environments to actually turn over soil so that you can reduce populations. And then, quite frankly, in the cropping system, there's some crops that pigweed doesn't love as much. So I think to winter wheat, and winter canola. So those are two crops where you rarely see a lot of amaranthus or pigweed plants in them. So if you're not including those in the rotation, those are things to consider. But it really is about being pretty vigilant about removing any plants, whether it be by tillage, mowing, to produce seed, to stop seeds from producing and dispersing.
Yeah. So you mentioned obviously the best way to probably control something like this is to keep it from dropping seed and setting seed and getting growing. With that in mind, what are you telling growers this fall as they're out sort of, harvesting soybeans and scouting? What are they looking for?
Yeah, so big picture is we found one plant. Right. Are there more? Probably. But right now we've only found one. So, this isn't widespread by any means. And it is, as you mentioned, super difficult to control. So our best control is prevention. And so the fall in soybeans or at corn harvest is now really the best time where this is going to be super obvious to identify. If you find it, pull it out, destroy it so that it's not setting seed and dispersing seed so that the problem becomes bigger.
Well, Mike, not the happiest story to report, but hey, some great insights. Thanks for sharing. Always great to have you on Real Agriculture.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, and with that, we're going to head to a break, and I will be back to talk thistle management right after this.
Did you know that Pioneer now has a full lineup of Enlist E3 soybeans? Take a look at Pioneer brand Enlist E3 soybeans for the highest yield potential and for the best agronomic package and herbicide trait options. From the lab to the field, Pioneer brand Enlist E3 soybeans are the best in beans, period. Ask your local Pioneer representative about Enlist E3 beans.
There's a reason we call it the Corn School. Videos on everything from planter setup, weed control, field trial results, yield strategies, and so much more. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF, Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast from your favorite streaming service. Download the latest podcast today.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by Pride Seeds, BASF, and Syngenta Canada.
Welcome back to Real Ag Radio. This segment is brought to you by Kloss. Introducing the all-new Kloss Xerion 12 series, delivering unmatched power and performance in the big 4x4 tractor range. Discover more at kloss.com. Joining me now on the line is Mark Versluys. He's Specialties Business Leader with Corteva Agriscience, and we are going to talk about managing Canada thistle. Mark, welcome here.
Thank you, Lyndsey. Glad to be here.
All right, let's start with, I think everyone probably agrees that thistle in general, not fun to step on, not fun to walk through, and livestock don't really love to eat them. But what is the actual economic impact of perhaps dealing with Canada thistle in pastures and hayfields?
Yeah, great question. So depending on which study you look at, the one that we use for 2023 is that it's an estimated $7.5 billion of lost revenue, but that would be all segments of agriculture and not just range and pasture business.
So that would include cropland as well, but...
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Now, so what is it about thistle, Canada thistle, that makes it so difficult to control or so costly for producers?
So the thing that differentiates Canada thistle from a lot of the other invasive weeds out there is its ability to spread. And what you don't see when you look at Canada thistle out in a pasture, for example, is that huge biomass underneath the ground that continues to grow and spread and shoot up more nodules out of that base below the ground. And that's the piece. So it's not just spreading reproductively through seed, in which case each plant can produce about 5,000 viable seeds in a year. It's also spreading through the root system below the ground.
So is that why we tend to get patches of it?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay. So now there are all sorts of, if you ask someone about thistle management, especially in pastures, you will get, if you ask 100 people, I'm pretty sure you'll get 100 different plans for what to do with that thistle patch, right? You'll get, you got to push the animals harder, make them eat it, or, so up your stocking density, or you gotta mow it, but only mow it in July, or, all these different things. So what do we know actually works for trying to get some of these thistle patches under control?
Yeah, like you said, there's a lot of different opportunities for people to get a handle on the Canada thistle. The one that I'd like to talk about here today is the herbicide use, and there's a couple of different ways that you can do this. For us in this area here in southern Alberta, for example, really the timing on it needs to be sometime in that mid to late July, and what that equates to on the plant itself is getting in there before bud, pre-bud. You can kind of push it a little bit up to 10% fluff, but before bud and pre-bud would be the best opportunity for you. If you can't get it then, after fluff, you can go back in, and then the other opportunity would be to wait until the fall when you get that first hard frost and the plant realizes that winter is coming, and it starts running all of its resources back down to the root zone. And if you can get it at that point, then it'll carry the herbicide down into that big biomass underneath the ground, and you'll do a really good job of controlling what you see and what you don't see as well.
So this is a really interesting point, right? Is that, so there are really 2 times of year. If you're trying to get ahead of this or do a really good job, should you be doing both in the same season?
Depending on the infestation that you have, Lyndsey, if that's what's required, if you go, like I said, bud to pre-bud, and you go in there, what you want to make sure and do is have as much of what's going to come up that year up so that you get the control on it. If you want to go earlier than that, you're not going to get everything that's coming up, and so you may need to go back in after fluff, for example, and do some spot applications to get what you missed.
Okay. Now, you did mention after a frost to go in and go in for that fall pass and try and get that translocation down to that root mass, try and really get a good kill. How late is too late, or is it dependent on, the temperature? How do you make that call into the fall as to when, might that window have closed?
Great question. And so one of the things that we always say with respect to any herbicide application is that the plant needs to be actively growing. And so you're really at that sweet point where the plant isn't necessarily actively growing, but it's still alive in that it's running the resources down to the roots. So if you get a bunch of hard frosts in a row, you're going to limit that opportunity for the plant to be able to actively move it down below. So it's really environmentally dependent what you're getting with respect to the weather in the fall. Perfect situation, like I said, you get a hard frost and then you've got a few days after that where the temperatures aren't quite like that, and you've got the opportunity to go in and spray.
Mm-hmm. Now, you did mention, of course, that in-season pass, potentially that pre-bud stage. Now, we are talking about pasture management for sure. How selective are the products that we're using? Is this really only something that could be used in a grass-based pasture, or are there at least some species, some broadleaf species that might also survive? What do we need to know there?
So we've got 3 products here at Corteva Agriscience that you would use in your pasture, and specifically your pasture only, would not be for use in cropland. And you would pick the one dependent on what your weed species spectrum is. They have different, they all get Canada thistle, for example, but some would get some of your trees, whereas others would be more broadleaf based, and the other would get brush as well.
Okay. Read those labels. Talk to your rep. These are important things that we need to know. Now, when it does come to, we do have, of course, these herbicide options as well. But that question always comes up about, the grazing side of things. So are there still cultural controls that ranchers could be using to try and knock these thistle patches back further if they're going to use them in conjunction with a herbicide program?
There's a lot of different ideas that people are talking about today. And the thing that I would stress is herbicide application is not a silver bullet. It's not a one and done situation. You really want it to be part of your integrated pasture management program. So one of the things you want to make sure in this case is that you have good crop competition. And in this case, it is forage would be the crop that we're talking about here. So you want to do other things with respect to your integrated pasture management program that will allow that to happen.
All right. So where can growers or farmers and ranchers go for more information if they're interested in Canada thistle management?
Yeah, for more information, you can go onto the Corteva.com website and search range and pasture. We have all of our products listed there, labels, SDS included as well. And the big resource that we have listed on the website is our regional account managers for range and pasture in Western Canada, including their contact information. So if you have any questions at all, please give these guys a call. They are the true subject matter experts.
All right. Good advice. Okay, Mark, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate that.
All right. We'll be back with more Real Ag Radio right after this.
Does your N stabilizer contain an active ingredient load high enough to be agronomically effective? If not, it could be costing you time and money. If you're putting down a nitrogen stabilizer, put your trust in Koch Agronomic Services. Solutions like Super U, Tribune, and Anvil. Each delivers high active ingredient concentrations that low-rate products just can't match. Compare how imitator products stack up to agronomically effective solutions at defendyourn.ca.
Infuse some energy into your next corporate event, customer meeting, or conference with RealAg Radio, Canada's national agriculture radio show. Create a unique experience at your next event with host Sean Haney, broadcasting RealAg Radio live on SiriusXM, featuring exciting guests, captivating interviews, and the latest news from the agriculture community. Contact advertising at realagriculture.com or call 587-787-1795 to book your on location with RealAg Radio today. Welcome back to Real Ag Radio here on this Tuesday. I am Lyndsey, your host. And do you want true nitrogen protection? Skip imitator products for an agronomically effective solution like Super U Premium Fertilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. Super U protects against all three forms of loss and is proven to boost yield potential. See how others stack up at defendyourn.ca. All right, we go now to a fascinating discussion with Tara Mulhern Davidson. She's a rancher out of Southwest Saskatchewan, and I wanted to know what it's like having endured several droughts in a very short amount of time, and if business risk management programs are actually working for their ranch. Tara, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Now, for those who maybe aren't aware of your corner of the world or don't follow you on social media, although you've been on there a long time and I love to see pictures from your ranch, what has the state of the drought been for your ranch for the past few years?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you, Lyndsey. I like following you all on social media too. But yeah, so our farm has definitely undergone many years of successive drought. So it's basically been below average precipitation since 2017 for our farm. 2019 wasn't terrible, but other years in there were very dry, especially now 2021, incredibly dry, 2022, much the same. And then again, 2023, we're in another dry season here. So yeah, it's been a bit of a long haul, I guess. And certainly we're not any different than a lot of producers in Saskatchewan, a lot of cow-calf and forage producers, for sure. They've undergone a lot of severe, continuous seasons of drought. Yeah, lots of challenges.
Now, so you do run cattle, you run a purebred herd. I'm going to guess maybe some commercial in there as well, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. But what has the impact been on trying to manage your herd, trying to think longer term and plan for the future and think about those pedigrees and seed stock producer in the face of not knowing when it's going to rain next?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. So yeah, we do run both commercial and purebred Galway cattle. About 2/3 of our herd is commercial and about 1/3 is purebred. Yeah, and it is challenging. So we run on our own property, obviously, but then we also rent a lot of grazing from other places, and we're also patrons in community pastures. So yeah, there's challenges in kind of all different parts of that. So first of all, trying to come up with enough grazing for your herd is always a big thing. Planning your grazing moves and rotations when you're not getting that regrowth is really challenging. Stock water has definitely been a huge issue in Southwest Saskatchewan, especially not just water quantity, but water quality. So that can be really tough. Fortunately, this past winter, we did have some snowfall, which was good. Some winters we don't have snowfall. Sometimes it's a brown Christmas, so that presents its own challenges. But we did have some runoff this spring, which was helpful in kind of holding our water quality stable in our area and our operation anyway. But yeah, so, trying to get through the spring, summer season and then looking towards the fall. So, of course, trying to put up enough feed for our cattle herd is a big one, enough straw. We do calve in February and March, so, of course, we need a lot of bedding. So trying to get straw in. Freight has been a huge cost for us for that. So, yeah, we've seen freight costs go up 20% between last year and this year alone, and freight was up pretty high already last year. So, if you're looking at 3 bales of straw per cow, you're already looking at $90 just to get 3 bales laid into your yards for one winter season. So, those are definitely some challenges that we've had to go through that are not, again, unique to us, but certainly to any forage and beef producer for sure. And I guess from thinking long term, so ranching to me is a long game for sure, but we're managing living commodities. So you have to think also, how are we going to get through this week, this month, this season? So certainly making sure we have feed budgets in place, whether our winter is a severe, harsh winter or not, that can make us go through up to 10 or 20 or even 30% more feed than what we would plan for. So I'm trying to prepare ahead and be nimble and be adaptable, but also maintaining the health and well-being of our herds, I think, is the biggest one. And yeah, it's really hard. So in our farm, we started in 2005. It's kind of hard to make like big swings at different ideas or innovations when we've been kind of just trying to get through one season to the next since 2017, basically. So it is hard to know what big direction we should go, what new innovation or technology or investment we should even make when the day-to-day has been so challenging.
I think it's a really important reminder at times that exactly that. You have living, breathing beings that you are responsible for regardless, right? So there's all these, big picture things to think about in long-term planning, et cetera, but you still got to get through the day-to-day, which is, I think, something that, if you're very used to cropping, you don't maybe always think about, but and that sort of brings me to our next point of some of the government programs and announcements and the management side of the everyday. And so we did mention social media at the outset, and it's because partially the discussion that you had this week on Twitter, I thought was absolutely fascinating, and it's a question I've thought about myself. And we did hear earlier this week that the government has released certain areas that are going to be eligible for tax deferral if they sell more than 15% of their flock or herd in response to this drought. But of course, that's by region. So Ag Canada is going to say which places can. And you asked the question online, can a grain producer defer grain income all the time? Tell me a bit about this conversation that you had and some of the feedback you got.
Yeah, so that was kind of, this question has been kind of an ongoing theme, I guess, of my fascination with how business risk management programs work in general and how different sectors kind of respond differently. So I guess the tax deferral question I got thinking, I think grain producers can defer a portion of some grain sales into a different fiscal year, kind of any time they want to. And I dug into it a little bit deeper. I asked a lot of producers, can you do that with livestock? And I got a variety of responses. So I think based on a couple of different tax professionals that I trust, it sounds like some people do defer livestock sales with some organizations that they trust, perhaps, but it's definitely a gray area, and it's certainly not widespread. It's not something mainstream most livestock producers would do. So I guess it just made me question, why is that a tax management tool that is available to one sector, but not for livestock producers? And again, you're dealing with living commodities, and that it doesn't exactly put you in a place of power when it comes to marketing. Sometimes you have to make those marketing choices, whether or not they're 3 days or 6 days in or out of your fiscal year end, for the health, safety, well-being of your herd, for weather considerations, for what have you. So wouldn't it be nice to have that same kind of convenience or option, I guess, not just in a drought year, but any time for your business? So yeah, that was just kind of a question I had asked.
Well, and I feel like it's one of those that, and I did see there was, and let's face it, it's the internet. People can be rude or whatever, but, someone made some sort of, comment about, looking for government handouts, whatever. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. We're actually talking about, Canada has a very complicated tax system as it is, but we're talking about essentially just having the equal opportunity to manage your income, at least within a degree. Like, how hard would it be to just make a note in our tax law that, up to a certain amount could be deferred between years? We do it with things like depreciation and all sorts of other things, right? Like, it's not that complicated, and it really wouldn't cost the government a whole bunch. So, that's a brilliant question. And so I hope this sparks some conversation because, as you say, deferral, even just of a portion of income between fiscal years, could make at least a difference, maybe not the biggest one, but a difference. And if other businesses have the opportunity, why not livestock producers as well? It also does bring in, we did hear this week, of course, Saskatchewan will be seeing its agri-recovery program kick in at some point. We're still waiting for full details on that. From your perspective, I'm guessing this isn't the first time you've been through this route, seeing as you've experienced several years of drought. Do these programs make a real difference on the ground? What has been your experience?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess I can just speak to my own experience. And every operation has their own goals and objectives. But I think, when I look at business risk management programs as a whole, there have been unintended consequences to the programs and policies in place that tend to not favor forage and grassland and beef production. So, certainly with agri-stability, this program is supposed to be in place for years when we're dealing with difficulties or black swans, or I don't know what flock of black swans is, but I feel like we've had a few in the cattle sector in the last 3 years, 5 years. I've been a member of agri-stability since the outset. Before that, it was CASE. I think before that, it was Beta, maybe. I'm digging back into 2000, but I've been a member for forever. And it isn't working for me in good years. It certainly did not trigger anything for me in the last several seasons. So how bad do things need to get on forage and beef operations before those business risk programs that are supposed to save us actually come into play? So they're obviously not working. I know there's talk about reforming them. How long do we sit back and wait for this to happen? Do we wait until our national cow herd numbers, which are the lowest they've been, I just looked quickly on StatsCan, at least for 10 years, probably closer to 20 years. How long do we wait before we stop the, mass exit here that's seeming to be happening, or at least the long-term, trend outward? We're seeing a lot of loss of forage acres. We're seeing a lot of loss of grassland acres. Prairie grassland, when I look back over 25 years, there used to be 18% of Saskatchewan's native prairie left. Now we're down to about 13. How long do we wait before we do look at some of these programs and say, hey, maybe they're supporting the breakup and cultivation of land that shouldn't be cultivated, which in turn is the foundation of the cow-calf sector, making it harder to find grassland, harder to find grazing, harder to find hay, forage, whatever. How do we reverse these trends? And are these programs not only not helping beef and forage guys, but are they actually perhaps causing the trends that are taking place?
I have to say, Tara, to know that something like agri-stability hasn't kicked in, knowing how severe the drought has been in Saskatchewan, I will ask the same question. So when is it supposed to kick in? It just doesn't, right? It blows my mind to think that, it becomes essentially a useless program at that point. And so, to your point, is the unintended consequence that it's really, you may as well have no program, which means another sector has perhaps a program, which maybe means that that's allowed the expansion of breaking up grasslands, let's say, or something like that, because that's what's supported. These are very big questions, Tara, and we're probably not going to solve them today, but I think that, I mean, we could try. But
yeah, and it's worth asking, though. I mean,
exactly.
You know, we ask them in the good years, or maybe we don't ask them so much in the good years. And it's taken this multi-year drought to really bring some of these questions to light. But, you know, we have to make forage and cow-calf operations competitive, or else we're going to lose them. We're already losing capacities. Mm-hmm. So how can we make them more competitive? How can we level the playing field? I certainly do not want the other sectors to not have risk management. They're very important. Yeah. They're important to our economy, obviously. But, you know, we need to be able to, you know, support, you know, the cropping sector needs a thriving livestock sector also to make use of byproducts, to make use of feed grains when they're, you know, feed grain quality issues and things like that. So I think everybody needs to work together on this issue.
Absolutely. All right, Tara, thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
This year might bankrupt us. If I lose the farm, I'm letting down generations of my family. Why am I the only one who can't handle it? Maybe the farm would be better off without me. Hello?
Hey, I was just thinking about you and thought I'd say hi. I know it's been a hard season, and I wanted to see how you're holding up.
We might feel alone, but we're all in this together. Visit domore.ag for mental health supports tailored for the agriculture community.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Tuesday. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and this segment is brought to you by Granubor from US Borax. Ask for it by name. All right, we head to Winnipeg to speak with Greg Bartley. He's the Director of Crop Protection and Crop Quality with Pulse Canada. How are you doing today, Greg?
Pretty good, thanks, Lyndsey. How are you?
I'm doing well. We have a very important topic ahead of us, and it is the Keep It Clean campaign. And I should hope by now that everyone knows what this is. But just in case, what is the Keep It Clean campaign?
For sure. Yes, I hope everyone knows as well. But if not, the Keep It Clean program is a joint initiative of the Canola Council Canada, Cereals Canada, and Pulse Canada, and the Prairie Oak Growers Association. And it's really all about market access. So the Keep It Clean program provides growers and even the broader industry with resources really for just growing market-ready crops. So what does that mean? Well, we're really just making sure that the crops we grow here in Canada meets the requirements of both our domestic and export customers related to sanitary and phytosanitary issues. So this could be making sure that we meet MRL requirements, making sure that we don't have any disease issues, and things like that. So it's, again, all about market access.
So, and I think most of us probably are sort of most familiar on the Keep It Clean side with perhaps an MRL. So that being the maximum residue limit. So that's, you know, about using our pesticide products on label properly. But it's more than just the MRL, as you mentioned. Like, we could be talking about, you know, disease and toxin levels, those sorts of things. Like, it does go beyond just MRLs.
It does, yeah. Like, I think the main focus or a large part of the program that we focus on is related to MRLs and pesticide use, but it is more than that. You know, when you talk about disease pressures, it's really, there's certain countries that have different limits in terms of their acceptability of disease in that grain being exported to the country. So less of a focus, but it's still very, very important for those markets that do require that.
Now, how did this sort of all come together? What was sort of the impetus for putting together a campaign? As you mentioned, I mean, there's several groups that have come together now to support this program. Sort of, why is it so important? Why did it come to be?
Yeah, so from a Pulse Canada perspective, you know, we really got a wake up to the MRL requirements back in around 2012. This is a case where we had a pretty high profile non-compliance issue with the European Union related to glyphosate on lentils, where there was no glyphosate MRL established in the European Union for lentils. So long story short, that's been resolved, but it really put a focus on our need to pay attention to all of our export markets and the MRL requirements and getting that resolved. So the Keep It Clean program, it's only one piece of the bigger market access picture, especially when we look at MRLs. I like to break this down into a short-term, medium-term, long-term approach. So, we look at all of our export markets for pulses. This is over 130 different markets. All those markets have the potential to have a different MRL policy. So we look at those different policies, try to determine which ones are problematic or not. And if we identify that a crop protection product used here in Canada is going to cause a non-compliance in export markets, this is where we start to get into gear and do that short, medium, long-term approach. Short term being Keep It Clean program, just communicating it to the growers and industry that, hey, this is a potential problem. You might need to either avoid using this product or talk to your buyer to make sure that if it is applied, it's not going to that market and goes to a less sensitive market. Medium term, working with that product registrant to get that MRL established and fix it. Can we raise it to a more similar level that we have here in Canada? And long-term approach, just getting MRL harmonization right across the board in all of our export markets. So a small piece of it, but the Keep It Clean is a very important piece to this puzzle where it's really communicating these potential issues at the farmer level to make sure we're not doing things at the farm level that can cause a market access issue.
I think that's a really good point, though, and the way you sort of walk it out from the immediacy all the way through to what's happening at a much larger level, that, there is at times work being done actively to potentially harmonize MRLs so that it becomes less of an issue, which is, I think, a really key point that maybe we don't always think about, but that work is often, ongoing, especially on very specific products or crops and the way they work together. So a really key point that I think sometimes we lose sight of is this is always sort of an ongoing challenge within the industry and something that's worked on. You did mention, though, and this is one of the things that I think, we here at Real Agriculture, sometimes we hear about some of the pushback on, it's a registered product. Why can't I use it? And you did mention, of course, being in touch with a buyer and understanding what some of the restrictions might be. How do you navigate sort of that communication piece of, yes, something may be registered in Canada, but the end use market, perhaps doesn't want it or we can't meet their MRL or whatever it may be? How do you navigate sort of that part of this through this campaign?
Yeah, so it's definitely a difficult conversation. And to be clear, we don't want to be communicating products that, tell a grower that, hey, this is a registered product, but you can't use it due to an MRL issue. Like, it's what we're trying to avoid in the long term. But, the industry here in Canada is really come together to recognize that this is an issue that we need to address as an entire value chain. So working with the grain buyers, working with the growers, working with the life science companies, national commodity associations, we've all come together and we follow, there's actually a policy developed to help guide this discussion through the Canada Grains Council. So it really defines the risk levels in terms of identifying when there's an MRL market access risk and at what level do you trigger and determine, Kate, you either just can't use this product because the potential non-compliance is that great, or can we manage it through an industry level or at a grain buyer level to divert it to a less sensitive market or not? Mm-hmm. This gets a little more tricky, if you deal with, the difference between, say, a bulk commodity that goes out in a large ship versus containers. That's a whole another level of complexity that, either makes it easier to manage or less easy to manage. Bulk shipments, there's a lot of blending going on. So you're able to take I wouldn't say take more risk, but you're able to, with the blending going on, it allows a product to mix together and reduces that risk level in terms of a single source providing that non-compliance versus a container, like a container shipment come from a single field. Mm-hmm. So there is no blending going on. And I think you just see a little more extremes on that end. So we come together as a value chain to discuss this typically in the fall, but, we're always looking at it and trying to determine, is the risk acceptable or not? And can we manage it as an industry, or do we just recommend not to use that product? Do you ever get pushback on the, this is a food safety issue?
in not meeting some of these MRLs? Is that ever brought up as a perception?
I wouldn't say so, and this is typically where I like to communicate, the understanding of what MRL is. Like an MRL is not a food safety standard. It's really established to facilitate trade. It's really just to make sure that the crop protection product's been applied according to label directions, in that country. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about residues and talk about MRLs, in most cases, it's not a food safety issue. The MRL is typically about 100 times lower than any food safety level that you consider to be an issue. So it doesn't really come up in the context of food safety, but it's really just a regulatory level that we need to pay attention to, and we need to make sure that we're following if we're exporting to a country.
Mm-hmm. To facilitate trade. I like that. That's a great term. So that's, I'll remember that in the context of this, because I think it's important in the way we approach some of these things. Now, I will say, in watching social media and, in communication that come from any of the organizations involved in Keep It Clean, there's some really great resources out there. Do you actively, how does that work as far as trying to reach growers? There's obviously a lot of resources there. There's a website, and we can share that part, but how do you make sure that individual growers are, have the information they need before the growing season so they can make the best decision?
Yeah, this is something that we're always trying to do better at, is make sure that we get the information in front of growers at a timely situation or a timely time in the growing season. So, what we do, and the main purpose of Keep It Clean is really just to package all this information up, whether it's the market access risks or the information you just simply need to know, put it into simple resources and get it out. So, again, value chain approach. We'd like to keep it clean. We can't do this alone. So we use all of our partners, whether it's our grower group members, whether it's the grain buyers, or even the life science companies. We put a focus on actually working with agronomists directly. So kind of train the trainer type environment where making sure the information is out there. If you have any touch points with a grower, make sure you're aware of the Keep It Clean messaging and just get it out there, amplify as much as we can. To make sure that it's known ahead of time. So if you're going to apply a pesticide product, it's no use learning about this information after the fact. Make sure you have it at the start of the growing season. You're aware of the potential market access risks. You can have those preemptive conversations with the grain buyers if you need to. And again, working with the full value chain to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Mm-hmm. And there is a website if you're interested, keepitclean.ca. It's really well done. I spent some time on it in preparation for this interview, sort of looking through. There's some, if you're a visual learner, there's some visuals there, lots of things to read as well. So there you go. You can head there. All right, Greg, thanks so much for this, a super important topic. Really glad that you could join me on the show. And we are, yes, harvest, but we're always looking forward to next year. So if you've got any questions about it, about Keep It Clean, please head over to that website. So thanks so much, Greg.
Thanks a lot, Lyndsey. Appreciate it.
All right. And with that, we are done. Another Tuesdays with Lyndsey in the can. All right. I am back tomorrow, which is super exciting. I'm here all week. I'll be on the issues panel on Friday as well. Of course, we've got the Farmer Rapid Fire on Thursday. Thanks to all of my guests today, and thank you for following along and listening. Of course, if you've got any feedback on the show, you can let me know. 1-855-776-6147. Or, of course, you can zip me an email, lsmith@realagriculture.com, or just find Real Agriculture across social media. We are at Real Agriculture. Love to hear from you. Thoughts on the show, story ideas, interview ideas, or whether you just agree or disagree. We like it all. All right, as promised, I'll be back tomorrow. We're going to talk markets, maybe some StatsCan data, all sorts of good stuff. Until then, stay safe. We'll talk tomorrow.